In this lab, we are going to learn how to deploy a WordPress application on Google Kubernetes Engine. I hope you all know what WordPress is. It's a PHP-based application that helps to develop a blogging website. Before Docker containers, in traditional environment, WordPress used to be installed by downloading a zip file from the official website of WordPress, followed by extracting that zipped file and then placing them in somewhere within the web server. But now we have Docker. Everything is Dockerized, even the whole operating system is Dockerized. So why not WordPress? Now, a Docker image of WordPress is also available in Docker Hub. We will deploy that Docker image in a Kubernetes cluster of Google Kubernetes Engine. As we are using Kubernetes cluster to deploy our WordPress application, we are going to use persistent volume as a storage volume for our WordPress application. Therefore, all the data are stored locally on GCP's persistent disk instead of within the container itself. We need attached persistent disk with our application to make sure our data persists throughout the life cycle of the application, even though the pods get recreated. And the concept of persistent disks relies on the concept of persistent volume and persistent volume claim. So what's persistent volume? Persistent volume, or PV in short, is a piece of storage within the cluster. Persistent volume could be provisioned by an administrator or dynamically using storage classes. It is a resource within the cluster, just like other cluster resources such as pods, deployments, nodes, etc. Persistent volumes are independent of any individual pod that uses them, which means persistent volumes will always exist in the system even if the pods that attach to them are destroyed and recreated. Persistent volumes can be destroyed manually by the cluster administrator. Also, persistent volume doesn't work independently. Rather, it works together with a persistent volume claim, also known as PVC in short. A PVC is a request for storage of a certain storage class by a user that can be fulfilled by a persistent volume. Like persistent volumes, persistent volume claims are also independent from pods' life cycles and preserve data through restarting, rescheduling, and even deleting these pods. In this project, we will use Google Persistent Disk as a storage backed by persistent volumes. Whenever a persistent volume gets created by the cluster administration or dynamically, Google Persistent Disk will also get created and attached to that persistent volume. Additionally, instead of a traditional MySQL server, we will use Cloud SQL, which will be a managed database service of GCP for this WordPress application. Basically, from first to last, we will go through the following steps to deploy our application within the Kubernetes cluster. First, we will create a Kubernetes cluster using Google Kubernetes Engine. Then, we will create a persistent volume and persistent volume claim that will be backed by Google Persistent Disk. We will also create a Cloud SQL as a MySQL database. Eventually, we will deploy and set up our desired WordPress application within the cluster. That's it. Now let's move on.